I wake up like somebody had stuck the diodes of a TENS unit on the back of my neck, and they cranked it up to maximum output, and it was like this huge wave of electricity. Not painful, but it was super intense. My name's Kramer, and I am a Sasquatch experiencer, and I live in below the Mogollon Rim in Prescott, Arizona, a little bit further east of the rim. You know, I always wonder, like, how do you qualify yourself in this thing, you know? And I'll start from the beginning. I had an encounter, the first and only time I was ever hunting, and this was in the southwestern part of Wisconsin, near the place called the Wisconsin Dells. And I had a friend of mine that was a big gun guy, and he asked me if I'd like to go hunting with him. And I grew up in Philadelphia, so that wasn't really part of our culture where I was from, but I was very interested, so I went and got all the legal things squared away and got my license, and off we went. And this is in let's say it was February or late January. Snow on the ground, and we're in we go out to this spot, and so my friend puts me in a stand at the bottom of a ravine right here, and then there was a berm, and then it dropped down to a creek bed that ran parallel to where the deer stand was. And so he says, "Listen, I'm going to walk up onto the ravine, and I'm going to try and beat some deer down to you, see if you can get a shot." So I said, "Great." So probably about 45 minutes to an hour go by, and it's really cold. And I'm, being a Philly kid, sitting out there like this in a tree stand, that was not my comfort zone. So about an hour goes by, and I start to hear in front of me some noises. It sounded like grunting noises and some walking. And so I started looking up to where I believe these noises were coming from, and there's nothing there. And I look over to the right, about 40 yards in front of me, and I watched this. At the time, it looked like a man with a black hoodie. And he's coming up about 40 yards in front of me to my right, up from this creek bed, coming over a snow berm, and this guy just keeps coming. And yeah, I'll keep it simple. It looked like an 8-foot gorilla with a man's face. I got a good 15-second visual capture of it. It turned around, and it stared directly at me. It made kind of a grunting noise. It turned around, and it walked right back down from where it came. And I remember sitting there. I don't feel like it menaced me, but I feel like it was menacing. Just the sheer size of it. And I wasn't into this topic. I wasn't into this. I think I'd probably seen the Patterson-Gimlin footage. I was a kid when that came out. And that's about my knowledge of Bigfoot and Sasquatch at the time. And I think that, so my friend came back, and this is the interesting part of the story, was his family had a cabin in the area for a couple generations, and I didn't even know how to approach this conversation, because the last time I knew, there was no such thing as a 8-foot gorilla running around in the wilds of Wisconsin. And I told him, I said, "Tim, I got to ask you, have you ever seen?" And I explained to him what I saw, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you saw him, did you?" And he knew exactly what I was talking about. This was something that had been in their family lore and tradition for a couple generations. Their grandfather used to talk about. They used to call him the wild man of the mountain, which is another, I think, common thing that we hear, or something similar to it in the Sasquatch world, And he would know exactly, and it made me actually kind of relieve me a little bit, because I didn't understand what had just happened, And so that's my first encounter, and it kicked off I think people go in different directions when these things happen to them. It's been my experience with it. Hindsight's 20/20, man, People either try and put some sort of human logic and apply it to something that they have never been aware of, try and divest it from their brain and deny it internally, or they do what I did, which was I just piqued a curiosity in me and a passion for the topic that's been with me for 3 decades. I been really lucky to have made connections and with people in this, and to meet some of the greatest people, and so the best people I know I've ever met in my life are people that have been engaged with this topic, and I'm really just kind of happy to kind of be around it. You know, so I grew up in a fairly devout Christian household, but I also always had a few different, even as a young man, a few interests in esoteric things. So, and I think I always felt that there was always something more, for whatever reason. I think that I've always believed that everything that we were taught, and this is even back then, and that there was a lot of things that were obfuscated from us or left out or just weren't, taboo topics that warranted some sort of personal investigation, And I think that's what I kind of applied to that sighting and to that initial experience, I don't think it happened right away. I think it took me a while to process it and to ask, I'll second guess, did I actually just see that? Did that just happen? Did I, and when I came to the conclusion that, yeah, that's exactly what just happened, and I just started looking into it, man, and that's, I've been down that road ever since, and had some pretty incredible things happen. I don't know how much I've learned. I don't know that we all, I think I know less now than I thought I knew 30 years ago or 20 years ago. That's the truth, man. I mean, it's a deep rabbit hole, and it asks a lot of other questions, more than it's ever answered for me. That's for sure. I think that specifically in the last 15 years, where I was done raising my children, and I had a little bit more kind of financial security and acuity in that direction, that I was able to devote a little bit more time and effort into, learning and going out. I've had experiences. I lived in New England for a long time. That's where I raised my kids. And, with the birth of the internet, and the ability to network a little bit, to look at things in maybe a deeper and more different level, where you weren't kind of confined to the library and word of mouth, and you could actually invest some serious time into, I use the term research. I don't consider myself a researcher at all anymore, but there was a time when I did, so I started getting pretty active, going back out and trying to provoke responses. I've seen enough structure and certain things, anomalies that go with this phenomenon all around the country, and I lived in southern Rhode Island, which is pretty rural, and there was a lot of things there that used to make me go pause. So I started doing the things that I think a lot of people, when they start researching, do. I did things like I would go out to this preserve, and at one point I saw a bunch of structures, and back in those days I used to walk around with a video camera and tech and all that stuff, and so I left beef jerky on this huge rock one time, and I came back. I mean, this is a spot that nobody probably been to in 100 years. Like, it was really, really remote, and I came back the next day and it was gone, and there was a quartz arrowhead where I left the beef jerky. Well, that was pretty cool, right? And so I provoked a response from something that I didn't know the answer to. Now, the odds of that being some homeless guy gifting me for leaving him beef jerky, that probably wasn't what was going on there. And so that was kind of my path. I felt like I always had a knack. I felt like I always had a knack for where to point the camera. I felt like I could always feel some sort of pressure. You hear that in this too, but a different sense would kick in when I felt like there was maybe they were around or something was around, and I was able to apply that and have some pretty decent degrees of success with some videography. So moving forward, I had the opportunity to move to Arizona from New England about 6 years ago, and So I was really good friends with a man on an online Bigfoot community, a small one, but some great researchers and experiencers. And I linked up with this guy. He lived about an hour from me, and he brought me into the fold of a group of guys that are it's a group of vets and people that have a lot of cachet within their community, and yet they're all experiencers. And getting involved with these guys took this to a completely different level for me. It changed my life, in some of the most amazing ways, and that's the truth. I'm so blessed to have had the opportunity and to continue to have the opportunity. We're all really close. I got married about a year and a half ago, and they were all at my wedding. Actually, one of them is an ordained minister, and he married my wife and me. The Bigfoot cake topper too. To be honest with you, so about 5 years ago, over 5 years ago, I met Kevin Keeney, who's one of the guys from the Arizona guys, and Kevin invited me to join him up on the Mogollon Rim, which is the end of the Colorado shelf that ends in north central Arizona and actually runs east to west, basically from around Payson, Arizona, all the way to the White Mountains in New Mexico. And in that area, there's 3 national forests that converge. There's Apache Sick-Reeves, Coconino National Forest, and Tonto National Forest. Vast wilderness. Pined heavily, ponderosa pines, aspens in certain areas depending on it. And it has a history, a huge Sasquatch history among the Apaches that live there, and among the locals in the area too. It's actually there's a name for that they call the Mogollon monster, which is a legend and lore from that area that absolutely connects to what we deal with. So Kevin invites me to meet him and to go out with him up on the Mogollon Rim, and I'd love to do it. I hadn't been actively out in the wilderness in a few years, and I was excited. I just moved out there. It's half the reason why I took the job and why I came to Arizona was the opportunity to be out in the Southwest and to get a little bit more back into some rugged wilderness and some nature, which is I'm passionate about. So I meet up with Kevin Keeney, and I spent 4 days up on the Mogollon Rim, which changed my life. I witnessed, interacted, and experienced things on a level in this phenomenon that I had hitherto never thought was possible. The first time I was out with Kev, we had a full daylight sighting, and not a brief one, not like, oh, I think that's what that just was. I mean, I saw, an 8+ foot Sasquatch running right to left at the visual acuity to watch the whole thing. And that kicked off a couple of nights that were just out of control. I experienced mind speak for the first time that week, those 4 days. So moving forward, it wasn't long after that, and this is going to sound kind of crazy coming out of my mouth, but I'm just going to speak my truth, that as a group, back in those days, I didn't go anywhere without a cameraman, and Kevin had all the, audio tech as well, and that was kind of part of and we had, gift stumps, and we had routines, and we were, almost like a habituation, Jane Goodall type thing. I think we were leaning in that direction back then. I wouldn't say as apers, but as we understood that may bear fruit. And we were asked point blank, collectively, not to put our tech away, to put the cameras down, put the audio equipment away, and we did it. And it's a catch-22 with that, but the reality of it is that when we showed that we were doing that, the amount of interaction, communication, and experience we had just changed exponentially, And it's also why I don't refer to us as researchers anymore, I think a researcher is trying to develop evidence and develop paths to evidence. And quite frankly, the need for evidence in my life for this has sailed a long time ago, and I no longer feel the need that I need to produce that for anyone else. You know what I mean? It's become a super personal journey for all of us, and a spiritual one as well, which I guess could segue into some beliefs about what these things may or may not be, and for 30 years I've looked at this. I've paid attention to everyone. There was never a time, just from the nature of my experiences, that I ever believed that these were some sort of undiscovered North American ape. That doesn't hold up under any type of scrutiny. It just doesn't. There was a time where I used to think Scott Carpenter, rest in peace, had hit the nail on the head. That, the Nephilim stuff, that checked a lot of boxes. It really did. If you're talking about an entity that could be, part higher being and part human, and maybe they'd have some abilities that we don't have, or perhaps used to have and lost, or whatever that looks like. All those things checked boxes, But so Kevin has a saying that I love to repeat, and I can't take credit for it. It's don't let your paradigm dictate your experience, but let your experience dictate your paradigm. And I apply that because my experiences with these beings has never been anything but good, uplifting, and spiritual in nature. And there's never been any negativity involved. And I've gotten the cross arguments from the biblical creationists. Well, these people will come and can deceive you into beings of light. I know all that. That hasn't happened. Could I be deceived? Absolutely, I could be deceived. I'm not stupid. But you know what? I've had too many incredibly uplifting things to think that I don't believe that anything that was by its nature evil and wrong would have the ability to project love, compassion, and do some of the things that I've witnessed and had happen to me as well. So moving forward, what theory do we have? There's so many different roads you can go down, we have all the Genesis stuff and the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants. I might flesh out something a little bit more, but I don't think anybody can hang their hat on that. I think anybody that speaks in sureties in this and speaks with definitives is barking up the wrong tree, man. I think that it's a broad scope, and I don't know that we're meant to understand all of it. That's the truth. I think that anybody that says they are this, and this is what this is, and this is what that is, I think nobody knows. Nobody. I don't care how much research you've done. Dig into the Sumerian tablets. Absorb Zechariah Sitchin. Pay attention to Linda Moulton Howe and all the UFO stuff and all the lateral phenomenon. It's all there's a common thread that weaves through all of it, but I don't think we know where it starts and where it ends. I really don't. I don't know what they are. I don't believe that they're all bad or good. I think that the guys from the AZ4, like our situation, it's just a segment on the spectrum of experiences, and it doesn't define the whole thing. It can't, because I've heard too many horrible negative things too. And I believe that. I believe that, I believe that they are a kind of people. I do believe that. And I know they can do some things that I can't do. And that's 30 plus years later. That's what I can say with a surety. Anything after that is campfire conjecture, man. And that's the truth. And that's even here amongst this whole scene, where everybody's kind of got their own camp. And I listen to all of it, man. I take it all in. I believe all of them. Because I want to be authentic and I want to be believed too. So, 3 years after I met Kev, a couple years after I met Kevin, in July of 21, I was involved in an industrial accident where I worked. And I got my hand caught in a chemical agitator. And I crushed, mangled, and amputated my right hand at the wrist. It was an absolutely catastrophic injury. It goes all the way, here's my hand now. It goes all the way, traveled up to my arm, right here, and up to my shoulder. A devastating injury, like something that happens to other people, a freak accident. So I was hospitalized for the better part of 3 months. I went through 22 surgeries and they tried to salvage it. They reattached it. The injury had torn the flexor tendons out of my forearm, so I had no finger motion. So an orthopedic doctor and a vascular surgeon were able to kind of Frankenstein my hand back together. They got blood flow through it. There's a lot of titanium rods that go down into my wrist, collarbone in my fingers. Like it has a lot of different parts. So I get out of the hospital in October. And at the time, I have no range of motion. I can't lift my arm, can't pronate or supinate my arm. I have no finger motion, and I am still in a significant degree of pain. And I should probably preface this and let you guys know that I've been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for a long time. And I had to be put back on heavy-duty opiates because of the nature of the injury, which was just another whole thing unto itself, you know? And so I'm detoxing and coming off of that crap, pardon my language. And so Kevin calls me, and he said, you know, I mean, the guys have been with me in spirit. It's happened right after COVID, so there was a lot of hospital regulations. I couldn't have a lot of guests. And Kev's like, but I mean, the guys, we're all close. And so Kev calls me, he's like, buddy, why don't you come out with us this weekend? And I'm like, Kev, I mean, my arm is strapped to my chest with this weird sling. I got bandages around my hand like a catcher's mitt. And I'm about as low physically, emotionally, mentally, physically as I've ever been in my life. It took a huge toll on me. It was, you know, devastating. Changed my life. So I'm right hand dominant, all that, you know, and I'm like, Kev, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, you know, I can't tie my shoes, I can't tie boots, I can't pull my pants up, you know. And Kevin and Chuck, who you know, put the full court press on me. They're like, Chris, you come out. We will set up a 10-man tent. We'll throw a couple of cots in there, and all you have to do is come out and sit with us and hang out. I mean, these guys are, you know, they're like brothers to me. They really are. So I agree, you know, and so we go out, and we head out to a place up, we've got names for all our spots, just like everybody does. We go to a place called Crazy Town, which is a spot that we like to visit in the spring and in the fall. And it's north of the Roosevelt Lake, up off the Young Highway. It's about 9,000 foot elevation. It's up there. And it's a place where a guy, I think we talked about this, who passed away, kind of turned us on to before he died. And he was this guy named Mitch Waite. And he had a YouTube channel called the Mogollon Monster. And Chuck knew him. And he was it's kind of like the early day Sasquatch YouTubers, long before many other people were doing that. Great guy, interesting. So that's a little backstory on where we were headed. And so we head up there, and Kev drives me up, you know, and I'm like, you know, I'm useless, like, and I just don't feel good. And I'm just like, it's so good to be out in nature again, but I'm sick. I'm like, you know. So the first night we're out, and it's getting cold. I mean, it's in the 20s, you know, late October up on the top of the mountains. And nothing's really going on. We don't have any activity. Maybe a couple twinkle lights, this light phenomenon that seems to occur when they're around. And so I rack out. I go to bed. So a couple hours after I lay down, and I'm on the cot in the tent. It's nice and warm, and I'm out. And so I was telling Jill this. You ever had you know what a TENS unit is? One of these, an electrical apparatus with diodes. They use it to stimulate muscle repair and muscle growth, sometimes some bone stimulation. So I wake up like somebody had stuck the diodes of a TENS unit on the back of my neck, and they cranked it up to maximum output. And it was like this huge wave of electricity. Not painful, but it was super intense. And it traveled from my neck down to my feet, back out to my neck. It lasted probably less than 2 minutes, but it was, so backstory on that, like I've had the zapping phenomenon occur multiple times, especially in the last, you know, 6 years of this whole thing. And so I knew it was like that, but it was exponentially stronger. And I don't really think anything of it because I know it's them. Who knows why they do what they do? Anybody says they know why they do what they really don't. Nobody knows. So I fall back asleep. So in the evening, I had taken my arm out of this strap kind of sling thing because it falls asleep if I lay. It's just hard to sleep with. So I wake up and I head out the tent to go relieve myself. It's probably 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning. And Kevin and Chuck are building a morning fire. And because it is, I mean, it's freezing cold out right now. We're all in bibs and, we got the right gear and all. So I go to take a leak about 20 feet away from where they are. And I unconsciously grab the zipper from my bibs and unzip it with my right hand. And as it's halfway down my body, I realize what I'm doing. It was just muscle memory. I was right-hand dominant my whole life. And I look down, and then I pull my hand aside, and I start to manipulate my fingers, which was, I couldn't have done that 6 hours before. It was impossible. It was medically impossible. And I start to pronate and supinate my right arm. And then I realize I have no pain in my forearm, in my hand, or in my shoulder. Zero, nothing. And it dawns on me the episode that I'd had the night with the TENS unit feeling thing on my neck. And I realized that something, I believe, extraordinary had happened over the course of the night. And I know that they did this. I mean, I know they did. And I honestly, I start to cry. I'd been through like a degree of trauma physically, and in all ways it would just like, it removed from me. And Kevin and Chuck are watching this. They saw this whole thing from beginning to end. And I walk down the trail a little bit to try and compose myself. And I say out loud, I want to thank you for what you've done. I get choked up talking about it because it was super, super personal and super powerful. And I said, thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this for me. And right after I said that, I get enveloped by this, I don't know how else, like a fog bubble of like love and compassion that gets projected on. It wasn't coming inside of me. I wasn't generating this. This was being generated onto me. That was so profound, like it altered me as a human being. Like I think at our age, we think we know what emotional love is and maturity and selflessness. This is something else. It was a lesson, like just a human lesson, And I try and bring that, like, even when I'm so human, man, like I can get judgy and arrogant and mean and sarcastic and malicious. You know what? And then that centers me right back to what I should be doing in life. It was a lesson that's never left me. It's made me, I'd like to think, a much better version of myself, And that is, so there's more to the story. I'll summarize it, that I didn't know how to approach the orthopedic doctor that had salvaged my hand and arm. After 22 surgeries, I left him and I went to another orthopedic doctor because I didn't even know how to approach that. And quite frankly, this is a work injury with lawsuits. There was a lot of money involved. I think if I was a perfect human, I may have acknowledged maybe more of the reality of where I was physically than I was, but I'd been through a lot too, and I could, my mind, justify just walking away and going in another direction without being dishonest, which that was hard. That was a strange line to walk. I think I did okay with it, you know what I mean? But I've had a lot of experiences, but that one to me that's the most significant and important one in my life. And I'll end it with this. I don't know what these things are, but I know that the more I have sought to grow internally and become a better person, the more my experiences have grown externally with these beings, and I mean in the best of ways, That's the truth.